Hey everyone, Becky here and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, welcome. I'm so glad that you found me. Today we're going to be doing one of my sew along sewing tutorials, whatever you want to call it, and we are going to be sewing up the Violet from Samantha Marie designs. Now, Violet has a couple different options. There's a dress, a shirt, and then a romper, I believe are all the options. I don't remember them all off the top of my head, but I think there's a short sleeve, then there's a hemmed long sleeve, I believe there's a cuffed long sleeve, there's a lined version or a neckband, then there's a snap placket option on the romper, and there's just a basic version, or there's the option to have the little ruffles on the sides. And I believe that covers all of the options. There may be a couple more, but there's already quite a few, so that covers most of them. I am going to be doing a neckband romper with the ruffles on the side, long sleeves hemmed, and then I'm going to be doing the snap placket. So I will be taking you through step by step from this pattern, starting out going over the pieces. I have everything cut out and ready to go so that we can get right into it. And I will put a link to the pattern down below if you wanted to grab it. I will also link anything else that I mention or any tools that I used throughout this tutorial. So let's get started. Alright, to get started, we're just going to go over the pieces that we need. And I chose to use a solid, this is just a rib knit for the side ruffle, the leg bands, and the neck band. So that is what these pieces are here. So for their side ruffle, you're going to have two side ruffles, which just are the big rectangles. You're going to have a neck band, and then you're going to have two leg bands. Now, if you're doing the lined bodice, then you're not going to have the neck band. And then we're going to have four of the upper panels, so two sets of opposites, and this is the arm side there. This is what's going to go on the side of the top there. And then you're going to have two center panels, and if you were doing the neckband, you would have just cut on that lower line. It's not going to look really any different here, but there was a dashed line on your pattern piece, and you're going to cut that lower line for the neckband or the higher line for the lined bodice. If you were doing the lined bodice, then you would have double of these. And if you were just doing the basic one you could do it without the ruffles, so you just would not have the ruffles, or you could do it where these were all one piece and you would just have one front and one back, or you would have two fronts and two backs if you were doing the lined basic piece. But then you're going to have two sleeves, and I'm just doing the long sleeved hem version, so I don't have any cuffs or anything like that, so I just have my two sleeves here. And then you're going to have two front bottom panels and two back bottom panels. And then you're going to have two back bottom panels. I think they're called the lower panels on the pattern pieces, and then two front lower panels. And these, again, you're going to cut as opposites or mirror images, meaning that when you open them up and lay them out, they are reflected. They're not, if you lay them on top of each other, they are not the same pattern piece. So to get started here, we are going to set everything aside besides our side panels, the upper and lower side panels. So for the lower, we're going to do the lower sides first. We're going to lay out our back panels, and then we're going to take the top panel, and with right sides together, we're just going to line up the outer edge here, which will be that shorter raw edge, and we're going to do that on both pieces like so. We're just going to pin those on the side. I'm going to do this one as well, and you're going to sew down the sides of those. And while we are doing this, we're going to do the same thing on the upper panels, and this one, they are the same, so you just have two of the same sets. It doesn't matter front or back. We're just going to line them up with right sides together, line up this side seam here and pin those, and then do the same thing on your other set. So in this one step, we're kind of doing 4 steps all at once, but we're just sewing up all of the side seams. So again, on the upper tops with right sides together, we're going to sew this shorter seam here, and then on the bottom panels we have a front and back side panel for the lower part, and we're going to sew this short seam, and again a front and back, and sew there. So I'm going to go sew all of those and be right back. Alright, so once you have those sewn, you should have 2 sets of your uppers and 2 sets of your lowers. I think I left my other one at my machine, but you'll have 2 lowers as well. And so now I am going to be doing the ruffle. If you're not doing the ruffle, you can just skip this part. And I did forget to mention, if you were doing just the very basic bubble with just the one front and one back, we're going to just pretend that this continues on to the other side. You would just line it up with right sides together of your front and back, and then just sew all the way down the side seam. Very simple, very quick. And then you would just go ahead and skip to where I'm adding the sleeves and neckband, and everything would still be the same steps from there. But we are going to set our tops aside, and we're going to put our bottom just off to the side, and we're going to take out one leg ruffle, and we're just going to work on one side. These steps are going to be exactly the same on the other side. I'm just going to show you on one and then finish the other one up off camera just to save a little bit of time. But we are going to open up our leg ruffle, or our side ruffle, and mine doesn't have any print, so it doesn't matter top or bottom. But if yours did, we're just going to take the bottom and go over to the wrong side, and we're going to fold it up 1/2 inch with wrong sides together and hem all the way along this side here. You can use a cover stitch. You can use this. You could really just use a straight stitch on if you wanted. You don't need it to stretch or anything. So you could just sew across there. I like to use a triple zigzag stitch because I don't have a cover stitch, and it just kind of goes up, and I do it where it goes a little bit over the top of my hem, and it just kind of catches it in there and closes it a little bit better. But you really could use whatever stitch you wanted along this hem here. So I'm going to go ahead and hem this up and be right back. All right, I went ahead and hem this, and here you can see my triple zigzag stitch, and you can just kind of see how it hops up over it and encloses that so it's not rolling over. And here is the outside. Once you give it a nice little press and steam, it kind of cleans it up a little bit. But that is my go-to stitch for hemming knits without a cover stitch. But now what we're going to do is we are going to sew our gathering stitches. So you're just going to come up here, and I like to do it at about, I don't know, 1/4 inch, and then just right off to the left of it. Also, you're going to set your stitch length to your longest length with a straight stitch and just sew all the way down along there, and then hop on over and just sew all the way down. The biggest thing is, one, make sure you leave tails on both ends, and then also make sure that when you're stitching you don't cross your stitches or you don't go off the edge of your stitching, because then you're not going to be able to gather those strings because they're going to knot. So just make sure you sew here. It doesn't really matter if it's straight, just as long as it stays on your fabric, and then that your other one is right below it and doesn't cross over on the top of it. So again, longest stitch length, straight stitch, 2 rows all the way across. So I'm going to go ahead and put those basting stitches in and be right back. All right, I went ahead and got those basting stitches in it, and you can see my 2 rows there. And like I said, it doesn't really matter how far you do them, just as long as it's relatively close to your edge. And then if it goes past your seam allowance, you just pull them out with a seam ripper. It's pretty easy to pull them out because they're so loose. But now we're going to gather it. So the first thing I like to do is I just mark my middle, and when I gather I like to use pins instead of clips. Pins allow your fabric to shift and pull through. You also could mark this with like a marker or something, but you just want to mark your center point. And now I'm going to take my leg side panel here and open it up. And then I'm going to take my ruffle and flip it over so that it is right sides together. And I'm just going to now transfer, I'm going to line my pin up with my seam because these are equal distances from each other. And I'm just going to transfer this pin there right into my seam of my side pant. And one of the other reasons I like to do pins is because you can easily transfer your gathers over the top of your pin, whereas clips, it can be kind of hard to get your gathers to go through your pin. Now we are just going to find our bobbin threads, and we're just going to pull and shift our fabric down, and we want our piece here up at the top to fit our piece here and be the same length. So for this one, I'm just going to pull from each side, and I'm only going to gather to the pin from each side. And so there I have it to fit nicely. And you can either tie off your ends so that your gathers don't fall out the end, which is usually what I like to do. So to do that, I will just find my other threads. Once I have it the right length, I don't really care right now if it's even, but I just want it to be the right length. And I just take my top threads and my bottom threads and just tie them in a simple knot. And just do like a basic double knot so that it doesn't lose my gathers when I sew it or adjust it. And then here I'll just use a clip because I don't really care about it. Adjusting, it's gonna be fine. And then just kind of shift your gathers along your stitch line to make sure that they're even. And then again, we're gonna just do the same thing on this side over here. Gather, don't need that. Shift all the way to the middle and gather until this edge lines up. So here I gathered it just a smidge too much, so I'm just going to pull it and stretch it out so that it's just the right size, which there it is. And again, I'm gonna tie off my ends here, and then I am going to put my clip in. And tying them off also helps get those gathers all the way to the edge. If you sometimes have issues with the beginning and ends of your gatherings to be flat and lose their gathers, this will help keep those gathers in place, because that's what I said, as you sew, sometimes those gathers will loosen up towards the end. So this will help you be able to shift those gathers and have them all the way right up to your edge there. And then once you get this gathered, you're just going to pin this, and then you want to go ahead and baste that down. And I just realized I actually messed up here. You can see my hem is here, and I don't remember if I said it correctly, but you want the wrong side of your ruffle to match the right side of your side panel. So I'm just going to flip this over, and it shouldn't mess anything up. I'm just going to reline it up, and my ruffle should stay the same size, so I'm not concerned. But you want to just make sure that your hem is facing the right side of your fabric, because you want it to be hidden. So again, wrong side of your ruffle on top of the right side of your side panel. And then now I am just going to go and baste this on and be back. All right, so I have this ruffle basted on, and if you wanted to, you could also line up this edge of your ruffle at the sides and baste that down as well. If you're worried about it catching or you just want to simplify things for you, just go ahead and baste that down. Again, make sure you line up the edges so that all of your extra ruffle stays inside there. I'm not going to do that. I'm not really concerned about it. So we are just going to move on to the next step here, which is we're going to take one of our top side panels and we are going to open it up. And again, this doesn't matter front and back, so we don't have to worry about that. And we are simply just going to lay it on top here and line up our sides. And we want to line up our side seam there through the ruffle and then line up that other edge. And now we are just going to go ahead and sew this all together. And then we're going to repeat that on the other ruffle and the other top and bottom side panels. So I'm going to go ahead and finish sewing this up and then I will be back. All right, so I have both of these gathered and attached, and I went ahead already and removed all of my basting stitches that were visible. There's still a little bit of string, but you're going to want to go ahead and do that. Just do it very carefully. They should come out relatively easily, just because there were those basting stitches. So it shouldn't be too hard, but just be careful that you're not ripping your fabric when you're doing it. So now what we're going to do, like I said, if you wanted to, you could baste these ruffles down. And the one thing I'm going to say here with the ruffles is you want to make sure that they stay in the right spot and lined up. You want them to hit at the same point, and then on the sides you want them to hit at the same point. So the best way to do that is, one, you could baste it and check it. You could baste it with a wash away hem tape so that then it doesn't stretch. And then the last way, if you don't want to baste it or anything, is you want to make sure that all of your stitching is starting at the same direction. So like I would start at the top here when I'm going into this next step and sew down. And then on this side, I would sew down. You don't want to sew down on this side and then up on the other side, or down on both of these sides and up on this piece, because it's going to throw it off. When it gets sewn, it will stretch and adjust a little bit, but when it's sewing all in the same direction, your adjustments are going to go in the same way. But what I like to do, and is easiest for me, instead of using wash away hem tape, is I just use a regular old Elmer's glue stick, like so. I like the purple ones. These are one of my favorite things to keep in my sewing toolbox. I buy a box on Amazon, like 30 of them, just so I have them whenever I need them. But this works just like wash away hem tape. It washes out, you don't have to worry about it. But I'm just going to line up my sides here and just put a little dab of glue on. This is also great if you let it dry. It'll harden and then it won't stretch. So kind of like wash away hem tape, if you have like some top stitching or something like that that you don't want stretched out, if your machine does that when sewing knits, then this is great. You just want to let it dry first, and this is going to give you that result because it will be hard and prevent stretching as you sew. And then I'm just going to come over here to this side, line that up. So this is basically a basting tool. You could do it all the way down there if you wanted to, but I'm not gonna. And you also could, I'll sometimes just put a little pin on it to help, or a clip on it to help kind of clamp that glue down, like so. And now we're going to move on to attaching our front and back middle panels, which are these pieces here, and they are pretty much identical. The front has a lower dip in it, so you can see here's the top and there's that. So this makes it the back one. So we're going to work on the front first. So we're going to start with our front of our panel, and the front is the one with the leg that scoops more. The back is a little bit more of a straight line. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to fold our center panel over with right sides together. I'm going to start up at the top and match up the shoulders, and then we're just going to pin this side edge here all the way down. And this bottom little divot here should hit right at the bottom of your straight edge of your center panel. So you can see here where it's straight and then it curves in. So you want it to hit right at that point. I'm gonna put a pin, put a pin in here, and then just transfer that pin over. So like I said, I'm gonna start up here at the top and sew all the way down. So I am gonna go ahead and sew this seam real quick and be right back. All right, I have that sewn, and so now I'm just going to flip that open, and I'm going to repeat the same exact steps on this side with my back piece. So the same thing, we're just going to line up the top up here, line up the side seams, and line up the bottom, and pin and sew that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then be right back. All right, so now that I have this sewn on here, we're gonna just flip this open, and we're basically gonna do the same thing with our other side panel. We're just going to line up this side, and I'm just gonna pin it and show you here real quick. I'm gonna show you both sides. So you're gonna pin it, and then you'll sew down that side, and then you'll pull the other side over to basically complete a full circle, and then sew down this seam here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and finish up sewing the main pieces all together. All right, so I got that sewn up, so you can see, like I said, now it's a full circle. So now you want to find your front and back panels and line them up. And here we are just going to take our shoulder seams, and you want to match up the seams from your front panel. As you're pinning them, match up those seams there. Then now here we're at where this is pretty much the same for the regular basic bubble romper, and so then you would just sew your shoulder seams together right there. So now that we have that done, we're going to just set that aside, and we are going to move on to the neckband here. And with the neckband, nice and simple, we are just going to fold it right sides together, pin your short end, and sew along that edge right there. And once you do that, we are going to take it and fold it in half. I like to start at my seam and just fold it and match it up with wrong sides together and put a pin in it. And then I quarter my neckband at the same time. So then I just fold it in half like so and find my halfway point from there and put a pin or clip in it, and I folded it a little bit. And then we're going to find our quarter points now. From there you just line those up on top of each other and clip your folds. You could do this with a marker, or you could also just put a little snip in your fabric. I just prefer to use pins. It's just quicker and easier, or using clips, sorry. And then we're going to also quarter our neckband. So I always start at my center front and back, and then I put my seam at my center back, And then I find my center front and clip this in. If you're using a directional print, make sure you double check that your print is the right way after being sewn, because you don't want to put your neckband in upside down on accident. And then we're going to find our quarter points at our shoulders and pin that in. And you just want to be careful because the neckline is not symmetrical on the front and back. So you want to make sure you find your quarter points and not just use the shoulder seam, because the shoulder seam is not your quarter point. Your front neckline is longer than your back neckline. So I have that in there, and then you're just going to take this over to your machine and stretch it slightly as you sew, and sew all the way around. All right, so now that we have the neckband on, you can see there, and if you wanted to, you could top stitch the seam allowance down. You don't have to, but you always can do that if you want. Now we're going to move on to the sleeve. So I'm just going to be working on one sleeve and one side, and then everything's going to be repeated on the other sleeve, but I'm just going to show you one sleeve. So we're going to take our sleeve, and the first thing we're going to do is fold it in half. Now, before I do this, I will say, if you are doing a smaller size, this one is getting kind of close. This is a 18-month size. But the smaller these get, the harder it is to get your presser foot in here and hem this. So one option that you have is to hem it flat, which means you would just lay it out like this, fold up your hemline, hem it, and then when you sew it together, it's already hemmed. The thing with that is you just want to make sure that these are lined up very nicely here, otherwise you're going to have an uneven hem right here at the seam. And when I'm going to do this normally, but when I do it flat, what I like to do is I will hem it, and then I will dab on some glue stick, or you can use wash away hem tape or something like that, and then put it here and let it sit, and then start from here and go. Pins or clips aren't enough. Even if you have it lined up perfectly, when it goes under your presser foot, it will pull. And so that's why with that little bit of glue, it tacks it down, basically baste it in place. So now moving on to how it's done in the tutorial and how I'm going to do it, we're just going to fold our sleeve in half with right sides together. And we're going to pin or clip down this straight side here, like so. And then we're just going to go sew down this seam, make that nice and quick. So I'm going to go ahead and sew that and be right back. All right, I have this sewn, so now we have a whole sleeve, and the next step we're going to do is we're just going to fold this under and top stitch this hem down just like I showed you, or if you had already done that and you did it flat, then you'll just move on to the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and hem this real quick and be right back. All right, I have that all hemmed, you can see there. And one thing I did forget to mention is you do want to use a stretch stitch. So I just used a triple straight stitch, so it just kind of gives the look of a straight stitch there, but it still stretches. So now what we're going to do, if you haven't already, you're going to turn your sleeve right side out, and then you're going to take your body of your romper, or if you're doing the shirt or dress, then we're going to just come to one arm side. It doesn't matter which one, because this one is just cut on the fold, so there's no front or back. And you're going to take your sleeve, and the part with the seam in it here is going to be towards the bottom. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to slide our sleeve in here with the wrist in first, and then that seam of our sleeve, we're going to line up with the side seam here. And then you're just going to kind of pull on it right there and find your center point, and then line that up right here at our shoulder seam. Pin that in place, and then you can kind of match up the rest of the sleeve. And again, this is a smaller size, so I don't use too many pins or clips in here, and just kind of ease that shoulder into place. And then you're just going to go and sew around there, and then your sleeve will be attached. And then, as I mentioned, all of those steps you're going to do for the other sleeve. So I'm going to go ahead, sew this one on, get my other one sewn up, get it attached, and then I will be back. Alright, I got the sleeves sewn on. Here you can see them sewn, and then if you opened it up, they would be on. And now we are almost done. So if you were doing, I'm going to turn this back inside out here for a second. If you were doing no snaps down here, all you would do is sew across this crotch seam here, and then you would just take your leg bands and you would attach them just like we did with the neck band. You would sew right here on this short end with right sides together, and then fold it in half, and then just put it on just like the neckband. But I am doing the snaps, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our leg bands and we're going to fold them in half with right sides together like so, and we're going to sew these short ends here. And I recommend doing this on a sewing machine instead of a serger if possible, because you are going to get a cleaner finish and you can clip those corners. So I'm going to go ahead and sew up those short ends of my leg bands and be right back. Alright, I got these sewn, and as I recommended, I just used a straight stitch, and I didn't mention, but you can just use a regular straight stitch. It doesn't have to be a stretch stitch here. And then I'm just going to trim my seam allowance down and then clip those corners, and that way when we flip it, it's going to have a nice sharp corner instead of rounded without any of that bulk. So just, if you serged it, do not trim or clip your corners because it'll cut your threads. But if you just used a sewing machine, go ahead and trim those down, and then we're just going to flip them out. You can see how nice that corner is. I haven't even tried to play with it or anything to make it lay nicer, and it already is that pointy. I'm going to flip these out. So now the next thing we're going to do, again, just kind of like the sleeves, I'm going to do this only on one side of the leg. Alright, and I did forget to mention that this isn't required. It's not mentioned in the tutorial, but I highly, highly recommend it, is to put interfacing on the ends of your leg bands and across your snap placket. This is going to just reinforce that. Especially this fabric I'm not too worried about because it is pretty structured, but this rib knit is very thin and I don't want the snaps to rip out of it, so I just put a little bit of interfacing. You can see there, just a little square. It's medium weight. I typically like to use like a cotton woven in there, but with how this is constructed, it's not going to work very well. So I just went ahead and put my interfacing on the corners, and I do it after I sew, and I don't overlap it with my seams. And so now what we're going to do is we are going to, like I said, we're just going to work on one, so I'm going to set that aside. We're going to fold our leg band in half and come to one end, and we're going to measure 1/2 inch. I'm just using my seam gauge here, and then we're going to line up one of the sewn ends of our leg bands right at that 1 inch mark, and then you're going to fold your placket up and over it. And I will say this isn't the best construction because this should be shaped to fit, but we can make it work. So your edge of your body of this placket, when you fold it up, it's not going to match the outside of it, which that's just how this pattern is drafted, but in theory it should match, but it doesn't. And then we're just going to, like I said, pin that one in place. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. And I'm going to measure up 1/2 inch again. Fold this up, pin it in place, and then we are going to, you can find the halfway point or you can just kind of stretch it, but then this is just going to be stretched around. And I sometimes just like to line it up like this because your front and your back leg openings are not equal. So just finding the center point of your leg band and matching it to the side seams is going to give you unevenly distributed gathers across your leg openings from the front and the back. So you could just kind of, like if you did it over here, just start here, line it up. And so it is pretty close, but you can see it's about 1/2 inch off. So then I'm going to just take this over to my machine and I'm going to serge this on. I'm going to start down here. And you want to really make sure that this is hugging your leg band really nice so that you don't have a weird gap right there. And that's another place where you could use glue or baste it if you wanted to. And then you're just going to stretch your leg band as you sew it on all the way down. And then you're going to repeat that on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one, and then I will also do the other leg band while I'm at it. All right, I have those sewn on. You can see here. So this is what I'm talking about, like where this fabric here doesn't go all the way to the edge, but it is caught in there. You could always reinforce that on a sewing machine if you wanted to. This side is a little bit better, but then we're just going to flip it out like so and flip out this one. And then I also forgot to mention, if you wanted to before, you could finish this edge. You could serge it across it before we sewed this on just to give it a cleaner finish, but nobody's going to see it and it's not going to really roll or cause any issues. And then now, if you wanted to, you could top stitch that down as well. Or if you're putting snaps in it, it would be perfectly fine. It's not going to flap open. Top stitching it down would just keep it shut and then add an extra line of stitching on the front there. I'm actually going to not top stitch it down. I'm just going to add my snaps. I'm going to put a snap on each leg band, which is why we put that interfacing in there, and then a snap in the middle, and call it a day, and then you are done. All right, and once you get your snaps added on there, you are done. And I just opted, I had some clear snaps and I went with those because I didn't have color that matched this blue, and I didn't really want white on the blue. I wanted them to be a little bit more hidden, but I will show you here how I just added the snap and I didn't sew that placket down, and that just really holds it all in place. That's really the only thing that I would change about this pattern, is this part here on the snap placket. Instead of having it be straight, I would kind of cut it with a little bit of an angle that would more mirror the angled edge of the legs instead of just straight down, to just make it fit a little bit better. But other than that, I love this pattern. I think it is super cute, and I think that the other options are really cute as well. But I really love the leg band, and that being the bubble. And I just love how many different options there are where you can make it super cute and frilly, or you can make it really basic and simple depending on the look that you're going for. So there's so many options in this pattern, and I believe it goes from a newborn all the way up to like a 14. So there's a really wide range. I believe the romper only goes up to a 5, I believe. I may be wrong on that, but I know the romper only goes so high because, you know, you're not going to have a 12-year-old wearing a romper like this. But if you have any questions on this style or any of the other violet styles you're sewing up, feel free to leave me a comment down below and I would be happy to help. You also can reach out to me on Instagram. My Instagram is Sewbexx. It's SEWBEXX, and you can shoot me a message there, and I'll probably reply a little bit faster on Instagram. But either way is a fine way to reach me, and I would be happy to help you with any questions you had on this pattern or any other just general sewing questions you may have, or if you just want to chat. My inbox is always open. I'm always looking for new sewing friends.
but like I said, I will link the pattern down below. Any tools or anything that I used, I will also link down below. And if you found this video helpful, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so that you're notified of future videos. Thanks for watching. Bye.